Megayonder. My eyes follow the sharp edge where hardened earth meets endless light. Distant tufts of blackened grass float fixed in a radiant void. Behind me, my eyes lay bare the inverted structures of the world. Airwalking. I move through a dense crowd. Old vacated warehouses pass me by. Dark clouds seem too heavy to be floating above. A chill mist occupies the air, making my face damp and my jacket shimmer. A thought enters my mind. If this is a dream, I can do what I've done before. I quicken my pace. In just a matter of seconds, my feet leave the ground. It is as if I am ascending an invisible staircase. I am not flying. I am airwalking. My body feels weightless, and the fog from my breath runs against my face. After a smooth turn, I make a beeline for the rusted wall of a warehouse. I pass through it. No physical alterations occur. I quicken my pace. I move through more. Eventually, I stop inside. I look at the muddy floor far below. A faint beam of cold light enters from a window above, shaping a warped blue square on the ground. Simultaneously, my sight detaches as I try to remember the path to my distant friend. An encounter on the hill. The defeated whispers of a cold breeze brush by as we descend through a blanket of pale clouds. Far below, patches of weeds, hardened earth, and dried grass speckle the terrain of a large hill. The ghostly remnant of what was once a road passes between flattened, ravaged lots. At the crest of the hill, fragmented tarmac concludes at the best-preserved fossil of this long-forgotten suburb, a simple two-story, factory-built home. It came with many windows, 2 floors, plus an attic, and a perfectly centered front door in the middle of its south-facing wall. Its chimney, toppled over long ago, left its east-facing wall in disarray. A crumpled-up sedan was parked indefinitely on its west side, and in what was once the backyard lay the mangled skeleton of a swing set. From so high above, the house looked like a little broken toy, and the man walking towards it appeared to be no more than an ant. With one hand on his pounding chest and the other resting on the butt of his kitchen knife, he peered back to see if he had been successful in outrunning those little, ferocious demons. He lucked out. They were just specks on the amber horizon, still fighting over what may have been the last of his rations. His body wanted to stop, but as long as he was out in the open, that was not going to be an option. The rugged incline of the hill was not making his journey any easier. Sliding his hand away from his sweat-stained t-shirt, he started to rummage through his shoulder bag to feel what was left. The leather interior was cool to the touch. Worried, he opened the bag and stared down into it. Empty. He whimpered and nervously glanced back to see if his pursuers heard. They were nowhere to be seen. His eyes darted all around and he quickened his pace. He was already halfway up the hill, but the house felt miles away. Resisting the urge to touch his irritated, blotchy face, he redirected his hand through his unkempt hair. From the direction he was coming, he could see the old sedan and observed that the windows of the house were all boarded up. He listened to the rhythmic crunches of his footsteps on bone-dry brush and to the long, empty sighs of wind. A chill breeze pushed up from behind, flattening his shirt against his back. Everything sounded deceptively peaceful, but the quiet of this world was constantly dashed by the tormented cries of starving beasts, the distant echoes of gunfire, and in rare occasions, the lonely, one-sided conversations of corrupted domestic androids. By the time he had reached the top of the hill, the clouds above him were thick, smoky, and glowing with strips of red. Stopping to lean against the side of the house and catch his breath, he turned and gazed at a golden sunset as another cool breeze swept past him. This pause, the silence, the protection of nightfall, gave him a small sense of relief. He slid his hand against wooden paneling as he made his way towards the front door. When he came to the first window, he tried to peer through a small gap between 2 boards, pitch black. He shuffled forward and placed his hand on the doorknob. His ears picked up a faint noise. He froze, motionless, listening. Was it nothing? There it was again. It was nearly inaudible, but he knew exactly what it was. His heart started to beat faster. Where was it? He removed his knife from his waist and held it firmly in his hand. Cautiously, he leaned his head against the charred wooden door. He stood there in silence. The noise was back, closer, with a new sound. rhythmic crunches. It must be somewhere in the backyard. He slowly turned the knob, but the door wouldn't open. He applied pressure with his shoulder. ED, reloading command. Process. A strong gust of wind pressed hard against the front of the house. He slammed his shoulder against the door, but to no avail. Catch! Catch! He could almost feel its sudden pause. Creeping backwards along the house, he made his way towards the old sedan. Ing to enhanced detect. Catch! 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 It was somewhere on the right side of the house. Sliding around the corner with his back against the wall, he inspected the wrecked sedan for anything of use. Trespasser. Remain. Calm. Bzzz. A fiery green beam of light shot out into the darkness. In a blink of an eye, he was in the backyard with his back pressed hard against the wall, the grip on his knife painfully tight. He peeked around the corner. A frantic shadow dashed out of view. 2 more glowing green streaks disappeared down below. Terrifying shrieks leaped sporadically into the night. Not resist. The metallic voice was interrupted by a meaty thud and a loud crash. He spun away from the corner and noticed the back door. He rushed to it and tugged with all his might. Rusted metal scraped against his palms until they bled, but the door would not budge. A tumultuous, violent struggle echoed from the south side of the house. His gaze found the twisted heap of metal that was once the swing set, barely visible in the quickening nightfall. Should he try to run again? His body could not handle much more, and he knew he would not get very far before starving to death. He had to stay. This was the first house he had seen fully intact in days. He inched his face past the back east corner of the house. The confrontation was just out of view, but there was something sprawled out in the grass before him. He tried to focus his eyesight in the low visibility. It was a gruesome abomination, one of the horrific beasts from earlier, unmoving, dead, an unbelievable sight. Do not. Res... A chilling shriek cut into the air, followed by frenzied scrapes against metal. His eyes left the creature. The ground was covered in rubble, and he noticed that the east-facing wall had a massive tear running up its side. When his gaze stopped at the bottom of the damaged home, he saw what appeared to be a small hole covered in debris. At that moment, he realized what it was. He listened to the fight. With split-second judgment, he crawled next to the debris and began to deliberately move the shattered bricks away from the hole. Suddenly, 2 hulking figures smashed into the dry earth, sending up a cloud of dust, unaware of his existence. Alive with panic, he quickened his pace. The hole was bigger. He was almost there. Out of the corner of his eye, shimmering blue sparks flew in the air. Zzz. Another blood-curdling screech shot out as a contorted mass slammed hard against the house, just an arm's length away. The devil spit a hateful snarl at its mechanical foe, but almost instantly smelled him. It twisted its body towards him and reached out with a single clawed hand. He gave a good slash with his knife, and the monster jerked away. He dropped to his knees and dived into the hole. It was completely dark. He tried to pull himself away from the hole. A heavy palm slammed down on his leg, and he found himself being pulled back. Blind, he reached for anything. His fingers slid over thin carpet with no resistance. He tried to kick at the leathery hand, but it only yanked harder. Before he knew it, he was outside again, and the creature was towering over him. Pinning him down painfully with its foot, it shrieked and lunged. "Stone family, please, proceed to—" A small motorized saw rammed into the beast. It lifted its foot off of him, but a large soup can of a leg took its place. There was a loud crunch and unbelievable pain. The 2 combatants continued their battle unfazed. Going in and out of consciousness, he dragged himself into the hole. Surrounded by darkness once again, he guided himself with touch. He eventually found a carpeted staircase and surprisingly managed to pull himself to the 2nd floor. The nightmare became more and more muffled and distant. He discovered a small room close to the stairs and felt for a place to hide. The room's window leaked enough light for him to crawl towards what he perceived to be a bed. He pushed himself underneath it, pressed against the wall, and instantly passed out. Shine. Little is. It is approximately 6:15. Rise and 15. The bathroom is unoccupied. Breakfast will be ready. Momenta and shine. Fun at school. School. His aching eyes gazed feverishly and empty at its flat, cylindrical legs caked in blackened mud. He felt miles away, walled off in a dream, but his shelter of numbness was shaken violently from the storm of his waking life. The nerves in his leg were screaming, and his head was pounding like a war drum. It sputtered a few nonsensical sounds, turned and lumbered out the room. Master, thud, 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 thud-do-do-do-do, crash. He was definitely awake now. For a moment he waited for someone to appear from the bed above to inspect what had happened, or anyone in the house, but they never came. He spotted a baseball bat up against the corner of the room. He tried to move towards it. Pain shot from his leg. He tried to force himself to continue. When half his body was out from underneath the bed, he turned. It was a bunk bed. He managed to pull himself up and use the bat as a support for his leg. Finally standing, he now could observe that the bunk bed was truly empty. Standing alone in the empty room, he realized how quiet it was. He pivoted on his good leg and hopped into the second-floor hallway. He turned his head left and peered down the carpeted stairs. They were covered in streaks of mud and stained with blood. At the bottom of the stairs it laid. The domestic droid, powered off indefinitely. Thank you. He shook his head, turned towards the railing of the stairs that overlooked the house's narrow living room, and tossed the bat away. He grabbed the railing and front flipped off the side, landing perfectly on an oval coffee table. His leg appeared miraculously healed, and his eyes were bright. He stepped down from the coffee table and strode towards the hunk of metal. Without giving it any more attention, he stepped over the unfortunate bot and marched to the back of the house. Finding the kitchen on the left, he pivoted and stopped. He reached into his pocket and removed a crumpled piece of paper. Smoothing it out, he brought it close to his face and squinted. There. He tossed the paper aside and made his way towards the oven. Opening it, he crouched and removed the metal rack. Ah, there you are. He reached in and pulled out a rusty can of meatloaf. He stands up and turns towards you and brings the can up until it fills your vision. Rowdy Rat's meatloaf, it's just that good. He lowers it. Also, I want to say thank you for coming along for the ride. Take care. He smiles and waves his hand as your vision fades to black.